at 5. Thank you very much, Tony. Talk to you then. All right, Kelly O'Dwyer is with us. Kelly, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Tom.
Hey, Kelly, I happen to remember that you are a North Melbourne supporter.
I am a North Melbourne supporter for my sins.
And across the other side of the political divide, Richard Miles, who happens to be a Geelong supporter. Good afternoon, Richard.
Good afternoon, Tom. Good afternoon, Kelly.
Good
I am a
afternoon.
Geelong supporter.
Now, Kelly, I'll ask you, because you're probably the underdogs, although Geelong has not been all that good in the past few weeks.
We're best when we're underestimated in North Melbourne.
Okay.
So my money's on North Melbourne tonight. 20 points.
This is going to be a much more serious conversation today, given that we've got onto footy. Well, no, I've picked Geelong.
Oh, have you?
I'm a little. That's a surprise. I've never not picked Geelong in my entire life.
Same with North Melbourne.
But we are coming off a 6-day break and having gone over to Perth. And there was a stat that somebody told me that there's not a Victorian team this year who's come back from Perth and won the following week.
We'll get this. There's not a Victorian team since 2007 that has beaten Geelong at its home ground.
There you go.
Well, this could be tonight is the night. I'm feeling it, Richard. Tonight's the night.
Well, good luck to both of
And
you.
it's Scott on Scott.
Scott,
That's
yes,
right. It is. Yeah, grudge
I've always
match.
wondered with those two if they just swapped one week. Would anybody notice?
Well, I went to a president's lunch when Geelong was playing in a preliminary final, and Brad Scott was there. And I was thinking, what is our coach doing at this lunch and not down there coaching the team?
He's brilliant. Identical, you're right. It'd be hard to pick them apart.
Okay, now, on a more serious note, Kelly, before the break we were talking about Asian investors in the Melbourne property market. I spoke to a representative of LJ Hooker. They say that in parts of Sydney and Melbourne, Asian investors are 8 to 10% of the market, and they are training their real estate agents to market more. In fact, they have a link on the LJ Hooker website to a Chinese property website. They want more Chinese investors over here. Now, I understand you're chairing a public hearing of the House of Representatives Economics Inquiry into Foreign Investment in Residential Real Estate.
That's right.
It's an extraordinarily long title.
Yes.
What are you actually going to be looking at?
So we're actually looking at foreign investment holistically, so it's not singling out any particular foreign investors. We're looking at the existing framework and whether it's working. So currently we allow foreign investors who are non-resident to be able to purchase, with the agreement of the Foreign Investment Review Board, new dwelling stock in this country, so new apartments, new houses, because that has a benefit for Australians.
Okay, so if you're a non-resident, you can buy a newly built property.
If you have received approval from the Foreign Investment Review Board, yes, you can. But if it's an existing dwelling, you are prohibited from being able to purchase an existing dwelling as a non-resident. There are some exceptions for temporary residents, but there are also rules around the fact that if you're a temporary resident that has been able to purchase an existing dwelling with the agreement and approval of the Foreign Investment Review Board, once you leave the country, you have to sell that principal place of residence within 3 months.
Okay, so if you've got, say, a child who is studying here at university from China, and you're a wealthy Chinese, and you say, I will buy my son or daughter a house or an apartment to live in while they're here, when they finish studying and go home, you're supposed to sell it again.
That's correct.
Right. Richard, can I ask you, is this something that you think is worthy of investigation? Only because we hear a lot of anecdotal evidence that Asian investors are just buying up houses, auctions are being conducted in Mandarin, they don't actually live in the houses, which on the face of it would seem to breach the rules under which they buy. What do you reckon?
Well, firstly, I think inquiries of this sort are really important because it's important to get a sense of what the facts actually are. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence, or not evidence, but there's a lot of anecdote out there, which I think often creates quite a lot of myth out there, and we do need to be completely clear about what the facts are. So this is an important piece of work that Kelly's involved in. But I go a step further. I think it's important that we start this debate from the proposition that foreign investment is a good thing. You know, so much of what has happened in Australia has been built with the assistance of foreign investment. And it's not something that we should be scared of. It is something that we need to make sure that we monitor and we have appropriate rules around. And of course, that's the case with every country. But it isn't something that we should be scared about. I'd be intrigued to know whether Barnaby Joyce will be providing evidence to Kelly's committee.
Will your colleague Barnaby Joyce, will he be joining the inquiry?
No, he's not on the inquiry, but I do have the spectacular Clive Palmer, who is part of the inquiry, and no doubt he'll have some interesting views. But
Clive Palmer, though, I mean, he is a massive sourcer of Chinese money to invest in Australia in mining projects. I don't see how he could be, possibly against it and be consistent.
I honestly don't know, is the short answer.
But let's just say people are doing the wrong thing. Let's just say they claim to be temporary residents. I don't know, they buy a property, they then rent it out to others, as several callers have said. Is there any body to whom they can complain?
The Foreign Investment Review
Okay, but how does the average person get in touch with the Foreign Investment Review Board?
There is a number on the website. I mean, there is actually a website, there is a telephone number. And the truth is, if people do the wrong thing, the government does have the capacity to sell up on individuals who have done the wrong thing. But it is a very long and lengthy process. And one of the reasons we're actually looking at this issue is to see, firstly, whether people are trying to get around the rules. Secondly, to see whether we have enough information at our disposal. And thirdly, whether or not the penalties for people who do the wrong thing are strong enough. And at the moment, you only have, around about an $85,000 penalty if you do the wrong thing. And I query whether or not that's a significant deterrent.
We've just learned by looking at the website that the number to ring if you are suspicious about a property investment in your area, I think it's a Canberra number, 02 6263 3795. To the best of your knowledge, both of you, does anybody actually pick up the phone at the Foreign Investment Review Board?
They do.
I'm sure they do.
And do you know what? We're going to be asking them these questions on Friday next week at the very first day that we are hearing evidence before this inquiry.
Because it's a public hearing, does that mean anybody can turn up?
That's right.
Except you have to go to Canberra.
Well, but it's also streamed. Well, no, this one is in Canberra, but we are going to be having hearings in Melbourne. We're going to be having them in Sydney. We're having them right around the country because we believe that this is an important issue. And Richard is right when he says there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of anecdote, and you do need to get all of the facts on the table so that you can make a very logical, determined judgment as to whether or not the framework is being applied and applied appropriately.
Let's go to a call. Bob, good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon, Tom.
Hello, Bob.
I think the question I was going to ask is almost half been asked by Kelly, answered by Kelly there. These laws are really complex. And so many houses in my area, particularly in East Doncaster, are being sold to agents. I just wonder, how can they ever be policed? Now, I hear Kelly saying that these things are being looked at, but the amount of time and effort it would take to look at each individual case, with so many transactions taking place, how do you ever get on top of it?
That's a very good point, Bob.
Well, Bob, it's a good question that you ask, although I would say, we live in a very multicultural community here, particularly in Victoria, and there are lots of Australian-born Chinese people who'd be purchasing properties just as there are people from other nationalities. So I think sometimes we draw from the people who are purchasing properties an inference that they might be a foreign investor when they, in fact, might not be.
Can I say, I think that's a really important point to make. We talk about Chinese investment or Asian investment. Actually, the rules ought to be about foreign investment. That's the issue that's being dealt with. From where that foreign investment is coming, there shouldn't be difference applied to that. And the other point I was going to make is that I think what's important in this work and in making sure that people do feel a sense of accessibility around enforcing the laws is that it does build confidence around our foreign investment regime, which then allows us to go down a path of doing agreements with other countries so that we can build trade and build investment in this country.
Calls coming up in a moment. 96900 693 13 13 32. Kelly O'Dwyer, Richard Miles in the studio taking your calls. It's 18 to 5.
Big names.
There's been a development in the Toby Green situation.
Big stories.
It will not go to appeal. The suspension will stick. He has been suspended for 5 weeks, and I understand that he's still unlikely to even play reserves footy in that time.
Caroline Wilson makes 3AW football big. And all the action of Geelong versus North Melbourne tonight from 6.
With thanks to your local Toyota dealer. 3AW is football.
Wouldn't it be nice to win $1 million? Never have a care from that day on. Wouldn't it be nice to win Tats Lotto? Sharing every dream that comes along.
Every
Every Saturday, Tats Lotto makes dreams come true. Just imagine if you won Tats Lotto this Saturday.
Wouldn't it be nice?
You haven't moved in 30 years. Where do you start? With
So join the celebration of our country's Indigenous culture, on and off the field. The 2014 Toyota AFL Indigenous Round. Visit afl.com.au.
Australia Post offers car insurance. And if that isn't exciting enough, Australia Post is offering a 20% discount on comprehensive car insurance for policies purchased online before June 30. If you're looking for competitive car insurance with a 20% discount, get a quick quote online today and find out more at ozpost.com.au/car insurance. Issued by Auto and General Insurance. Conditions and exclusions apply. Consider the PDS at ozpost.com.au before deciding to buy.
Rolling Stones are the greatest rock and roll band in the world. It's Only Rock and Roll is a journey of songs and stories that takes the audience into a time when the Stones reigned over the music world. The sensational new theatre show, It's Only Rock and Roll, appears live June 7th, Palms at Crown. Book now.
On 9 News, Christopher Badness Binns jailed over a violent shootout. A daughter's thanks for a kidney transplant miracle. Incredible pictures of a baby's window plunge, and the French swallow up an Aussie ice cream icon. 9 News at 6.
Drive with Tom Elliott. Hugh Jackman guest stars on The Living Room, 7:30 tonight on 10.
4:45. John, good afternoon.
I would like to know if you are going to stop Chinese investment completely, because I think we should not be dealing with authoritarian communists.
Yes.
Under any way, shape or form. I really wonder about your morals as politicians for allowing so much investment from a communist country which does not even allow free speech.
Well, now, John makes a good point. I mean, in Iran last week, 6 teenagers were arrested for making a dance video. China is still, notionally speaking, a communist authoritarian regime. Should we accept money from such a place?
We should be doing business with China. We should unquestionably be doing business with China, and we are in great measure. I mean, in terms of the products that you go to the shop and buy, so much of it comes from China, but also what we've sold in iron ore, for example, has been very important for our economy as well as the Chinese economy. And the question that John raises in terms of the nature of the Chinese government is an important one, but there is a lot to be gained in terms of freedoms in China and the promotion of human rights in China, and for that matter, the lifting of people out of poverty in China through economic engagement that other countries like ourselves have with China.
Okay,
and
John,
we often raise those issues with China when we speak to them.
John, you can take that as an emphatic no. Now, Frances Abbott, I spoke to a blogger called Victoria Rollison earlier on in the program. She has written an open letter to Frances Abbott. Essentially, Victoria, like many other people, cast doubt on the $60,000 scholarship that Frances Abbott has received. My view, for what it's worth, is that I think the families of politicians should be sacrosanct. It's fine. Have a go at serving politicians, by all means. That's what you're all there for, after all, amongst other things. But
we try and do our job too.
Children should be kept out of it. Okay, so first question to you, Kelly. Did Tony Abbott make a mistake to bring his daughters into the political campaign at the last election? Because a lot of people think that having put them up on stage, that they are now part of the political process.
No,
your thoughts?
Absolutely not. And look, I share your view that nasty smear campaigns on family members is really totally below the belt. Family members have no choice about who they're related to. You know, they're as Tony himself has said, they're conscripts in this whole political exercise.
You can pick your friends, but you can't choose your family.
That's right. And I think what's going on here with Frances Abbott is a really nasty smear campaign. It's designed to try and attack the Prime Minister. You know, I think, I'm sure Richard would condemn it just as I do.
Richard, how do you feel about it?
Oh, look, I essentially agree with that. I think that I don't like it when relatives of politicians are put into the frame. I think this is a matter between Frances Abbott and the Sydney Design Institute,
or the White House Institute of Design,
and it's for them to explain that. But I don't think it is. It does anyone credit to go to that space and start criticising her. And she doesn't choose to be the daughter of the Prime Minister. And this is really a matter which is best left alone. And I think the other point is this: attacking Francis Abbott, or for that matter, any relative of a politician, doesn't go to the question of what makes our country a better country and how we can improve people's lives. So it's not about public policy.
I remember being uncomfortable when Therese Rain came in for some stick for a variety of things when Kevin Rudd was the Prime Minister. And I just thought, you know what one is, I have a lot of admiration for her. She's a very successful woman in her own right. I mean, arguably more successful than her husband.
But a lot of the left-wing media, of course, at that point sort of said what a disgrace it was that she was being attacked. And I have to say, you know, I agree with that. But I'm not hearing the same condemnation right now, Tom, from those same people.
All right, well, it seems like we're all in furious agreement. But the only thing is, what about the fact that he did use his daughters a lot during the election campaign? Now, I believe that was part of trying to counter the perception that Tony Abbott isn't much liked by women.
Well, can I put it to you a different way? I mean, if your dad is going for one of the greatest jobs in the country, one that's going to effectively define and change the nation, wouldn't you want to support your dad in doing that as a family member? I mean, families, I think it's wonderful that his daughters wanted to support him, in his campaign. And I think the idea that we're now somehow trying to drag them into the dirty political games is really just beyond the pale. And I think, frankly, the people that are doing it ought to be ashamed.
Now, another thing this week, I interviewed a number of students. Some of them protested against the evil budget. Some did not. I interviewed several protesters who claimed to be socialists. That was interesting. But the whole concept of protesting and getting violent and angry at this, Richard Miles, was it justified?
Was protest justified?
Well, this week's protest, the students protesting against the education cuts in the budget.
Well, there is, in my view, never a justification for violent protest. So that's an absolute. People have an absolute right to put forward their view, but there is never a right for violent protest. But I think, given the nature of the budget, it was entirely appropriate that there be protests around the country. None of that surprised me, and people have a right to engage in peaceful protest and to make their voices heard. And I was very disappointed that we had a situation where the Prime Minister didn't come down to Geelong because he didn't want to see the negative visuals associated with people protesting around him. And I think that, gives us a sense in Geelong that we've been cut loose by the budget.
Richard, I don't agree with that. It would have been... Look, let me tell you, I spoke at an alumni function for the Melbourne Law School. It was off campus, but they had 2 security guards there because of what happened with Sophie Mirabella and Julie Bishop being violently, frankly, it could have come to blows, and they were very concerned about the safety in my position. Now, obviously, there wasn't an issue, but let me tell you, it's really bad when you've got violent protests. No one's got a problem with people speaking their minds, but when it turns to violence, frankly, I think people do themselves no good.
We all agree with that, but when was the last time we saw the Prime Minister in public?
We'd better leave it there.
He does not go out with the people now.
We'll bring this up again in 2 weeks' time. Kelly, Richard, good as always to talk with you. Calls coming up. It's 8 to 5.
Hello, Peter Mitchell.